This is Realme's new GT Neo 6 SE. The name might be a mouthful, but it is one of the most complete phones I've covered in recent times. Well, it's got its fair share of compromises. The sheer amount of features, the functionality Realme's packed into this phone, it's very impressive, especially given the insanely low asking price. So, if this is your first time here, or in case you just can't remember, my name's Ash, you're watching C4E Tech, and welcome to my detailed video on Realme's almost flagship GT Neo 6 SE. Let's get started. As always, let's kick things off with the unboxing. Guys, I bought the base version, which is a 256 gigs, pretty cool. Let's go ahead, open up the box. Now the first thing you see on the inside is this black insert. This houses the SIM ejector tool, a quick start guide, and a solid covered soft case that we will talk about in a bit. Next, we get to the smartphone itself. This is the Realme GT Neo 6 SE. I think the back looks fabulous. I got the silver version. Realme also sells this in a green. Getting back to the box, we then have a USB cable, Type A to Type C, and finally a 100-watt SuperVOOC charger. Now this phone, it sports a 5500 mAh battery on the inside, and with this included 100-watt SuperVOOC charger, Realme claims you can get a 50% charge in just 12 minutes, a full charge in about 27. Pretty solid. Now despite having a high-capacity battery, the Neo 6 SE, it weighs in at just 190-ish grams. It feels nice in hand, and given the display and the back both curve inwards, it feels slimmer than it actually is. And it's actually pretty sleek to begin with. It's just 8.65mm thick. Now despite this, Realme still offers stereo speakers, an IR blaster, and even an IP65 rating for this phone. So what's the catch? Well, if you noticed, there are no antenna lines on the sides, meaning it is plastic. And this back, this is plastic too. It might look like it has a frosted finish, but it really doesn't. It's glossy AF, very prone to picking up fingerprints and smudges. Now once upon a time, Realme's cases used to be pretty awesome. If you remember which phone this is, leave a comment. Now that was then, this is now. The lip around the camera, it's functional, sure, but it just looks awful, doesn't it? What do you think? Again, leave a comment. Now the real highlight of this phone, it's gotta be this. The display. Look at how slim the bezels are. Actually, forget that. Just look at the spec sheet. This is a 6.78-inch 10-bit AMOLED panel from BOE. It's covered by Corning's Gorilla Glass Victus 2. The resolution is above Full HD, it's 1.5K. The refresh rate 120Hz, which is fine, but there's also LTPO support, which lets you vary that refresh from 0.5Hz to 120, which is not really common in this segment. Also uncommon in this segment is the fact that this panel, it can go up to 6000 nits, which is the highest on any display on any smartphone, regardless of price today. And yes, it is only for HDR. Now usually if a phone in this segment hit 1050 nits under auto mode, we call it acceptable. But this one hit 1050 under manual mode. Under auto, it goes all the way up to 1650 nits, which puts it ahead of even some flagship displays. Realme is definitely punching way above weight class with display here. Now, what's got a display without the specs to back it up, right? Well, Realme seems to have pulled that one off too. This phone's powered by the Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 3, and we've spoken a lot about the 7 Plus Gen 3 in recent videos. In fact, I even have a dedicated video on this, so check it out if you want more detailed info. But here, in the context of this video, the Realme GT Neo 6 SE, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? So to understand what it brings to the table, we also need to take a look at its main competitor, the Redmi Turbo 3, which I recently covered. Again, a card to that video in case you missed it. Who are we kidding? It's C4E Tech, you probably missed it, so if you want to know more. Now self-deprecation apart, that phone, the Redmi Turbo 3, it sports a Snapdragon 8S Gen 3. So it's kind of important to understand what's the difference, what's the gap between these two SoCs. Now when you look close, there really isn't much of a difference, since the 7 Plus Gen 3 is basically the exact same chip with slightly lower clock speeds. And this reflects in benchmarks too. See here with Antutu, the Realme's CPU, GPU scores are both about 10% lower, and you see the same kind of difference with Geekbench too. Now Realme, unlike Redmi, did let me run a 3D Mark stress test, and there is no major throttling either, with this phone retaining almost 90% of its performance after 20 minutes of the GPU being continuously pushed. Now the 7 Plus Gen 3 here, it's paired with 8, 12 or 16 gigs of LPDDR5X RAM and 256 or 512 gigs of UFS 4.0 storage. So really impressive specs here, and these two translate to solid gaming performance. Now do note that the back does get quite warm while playing. It's not unusably hot, but it's definitely something you're gonna notice. Now talking about gaming, Realme with Realme UI 5.0 on this phone, they've provided a lot of tools specifically aimed at gamers. Like always, you get to choose between low power, balanced and GT modes. Now if you want, you can dig further in and adjust the clock speeds of each CPU core cluster individually. Now you can do the same for the GPU too. Now add to that, there's an option to force HDR mode for some games that don't have native support for it. You can also boost the frame rate, optimize touch sensitivity and so on. So there's a lot of granular control provided here. I like Realme's attention to detail. Now while these features are pretty solid, pretty useful, it's not really a Realme without some gimmicky ones too, right? Now of course they're also included. For example, we've got air gestures, which like pretty much every air gesture implementation in history, it's hit or miss. Then there's your AI eye comfort mode. Like for real, the selfie camera is supposed to somehow measure your eye fatigue and adjust colors accordingly. Now there's also some actually useful AI implementation here in the form of an AI eraser tool. While it only works with removing people, it is decent at that. The issue here for me was the fact that it was very slow. I mean, see this is how long it takes. And for comparison, this is how long it takes to do the same thing with the Redmi Turbo 3. Now to be fair to Realme, this AI function is in beta at the moment and Realme even makes you sign up to use it. But hey, when we are looking at a phone, we gotta look at it as what it is right now instead of what it potentially can be in the future, right? Anyways, talking about the cameras and the Redmi Turbo 3, we have a very similar camera setup here. Dual cameras with dual flashes. In fact, these two phones share the same secondary sensor, an 8 megapixel Sony IMX355 for ultra-wides. Now, while the sensor might be the same, the processing, it's quite different. Realme's gone for a more brighter image with higher saturation, while Redmi's chosen to keep things more natural. Personally, I like the Realme look here. It's not too saturated, but still is punchy enough to make the image pop, make it look good. And that kind of continues with the primaries too. Now here, they don't share the exact same sensor, but they do share a lot of similarities. Both use 50 megapixel half-inch sensors paired with optically stabilized lenses, Light 600 on the Redmi, IMX882 on the Realme. And the results, again, the difference in processing is prevalent. It's kind of similar to what we saw with the ultra-wides. Realme's opted for a more brighter, more saturated look, and actually edges ahead with dynamic range too. Like look at this scenario. There's not a lot of difference in the shadows, but the highlights, there's more area blown out around the sun on the Redmi, meaning the Realme is actually done better. Now of course, the Redmi's faster f1.59 lens does help it shoot images with a much shallower depth of field, stronger background blur, and it also helps Redmi pull ahead under low light. But even under low light, Realme's performance is not really bad. It's something I'd call average or even above average for the segment. Now with video, it can do 4K 60 and it can do it with better stabilization than the Redmi Turbo 3, but there's this horrible EIS jitter which to me makes the footage almost unusable. What do you think about this? Now surprisingly, the 32 megapixel selfie camera here can also shoot 4K and the footage was pretty good. The stabilization here is fine. The dynamic range is a little iffy, but at this budget, can't really complain. The stills themselves turned out quite good too. Even the edge detection seemed to be on point. And now with all that said and done, time to talk price. And like I said, this phone, it's been priced ridiculously low. It starts at just 1699 RMB, which converts to about 19,500 Indian rupees or 235 US dollars. And for that price, this is a whole lot of phone. Realme's done really good here. The GT Neo 6 SE, flaws and all, seems to offer the best value in its segment. What do you guys think about this one? Love it, hate it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.